Greetings, everyone. This is Payman Lorenzo, your host of the Leaders Art Podcast. Today, for episode number, let me check, 242. Wow, fast approaching 250.
You're getting old, my boy.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. Yes, yes, yes. Anyways, thank you, brother. Today, I have a very special guest, my great friend, Mr. Stuart Elliott. Wow, what can I say about Stuart? He's from the UK. He moved to South Africa and then he's been living in China for 10 years. He's built a life for himself there, two daughters. He's a collector of stories, which is something similar to what I do. When people ask me, what do you do? I tell them I'm a collector. What do you collect? I collect success stories. So that's something that we have in common. And I love what he does. He helps people get out of their own way so that they can create a life full of possibilities. We're just talking about possibilities and lifestyle and how to really elevate your life. We've been talking on this call today for half an hour. I said, I wish we were recording this because that was a beautiful conversation about how you can improve the quality of lifestyle, comparing lifestyle in the West, in the UK for him, for me in Canada versus say in Malaysia and China and other places in Brazil. But anyways, there's so much we can talk. Me and him, we can go for hours and hours. He's an incredible man with a lot of life experiences and a fascinating life. So that's why he's here today. Plus, the fact that he lived in China for so long and I lived for 4 years. I had a great time. I had an incredible experience in China, as I was just telling him. So we connect on many levels. So, anyways, I believe that this can be we will do more than just one episode because there's so many things we can talk. We can do an entire episode just on China because there's so many stories that we can both share about that alone. Not talking about politics, just regular life and stuff about China and how China can be amazing. But anyways, without any further ado, Stuart, brother, welcome to the show.
Yeah, well, thank you, Payman. And you said that I'm a wonderful person. That makes there's two wonderful people on this call because you're also a wonderful person.
Thank you.
And we talk, and as you say, we could talk forever. And the stories we both got, and we can share and can bounce off each other. We'll create more stories. So it's an honor to be here, and always a pleasure to talk with you. So that's wonderful. And I have to just correct you a little bit. I've been here 20 years, not 10 years.
Yeah. Sorry?
But I've been here 20 years, not 10 years.
Oh, wow. Damn, that's even better. Wow. Mr. China, huh? Wow. We're going to talk different at the moment, but tell us. So, what I like to do in my podcast, sure, we're going to talk about your business, your professional aspect, and your impact. But what I really want to focus in this podcast is to get to know you as a person. I like to have a look under the hood, so to speak, to see what's in your heart, to see who's Stuart as a person, as a man, as a human being. So tell us, for people who don't know you, who's Stuart as a person, as a man, as a human being?
Well, I started off as a very shy person.
Oh, yeah?
And I was the original, wallpaper on the wall at the parties when I was 16, 17. And I was praying, shall we say, that people would come talk to me. And I was watching them and praying. And, yeah, he's coming over, or she's coming over. No, shit, they've gone somewhere else. And this went on for quite a while. But, as I got older and a little bit wiser, I realized that, number one, the shyness was actually a blessing in disguise because it allowed me to see things that so many people couldn't see.
And protect you.
And that's a wonderful thing. Yeah, and it protects me, but I mean, it gave me those observation skills that so many people didn't have, or allowed me to fine tune them. And I always had a passion for nature and being outside, and that's what, couple that with a passion for Africa. That's why I did an overland trip through Africa. It took 6 months in '86 to drive from Joburg or South Africa back to London through quite a few different countries. And the stories and all the adventures there, that's something
we can do an entire episode just on that, my friend,
Yeah. And when I got back to the UK, I got off the ferry and I said, I don't like it. I'm going back. So 3 months later, I was back in Africa and I stayed there in 2003. That was from '86 to 2003. And then, as happens, life happened and things fell apart. And I was offered an opportunity to come here and teach English.
Beautiful.
And I said, okay, fine. Where? Is it north or south? If it's the north, it's like Canada. It's too damn cold. Sorry, but I don't want to know.
Yeah.
But they said, no, it's not far from Vietnam. So I said, okay, no problem. I came. And getting here was an adventure in and of itself, and that's a beautiful thing. But you ask who I am. I love nature. I love being outdoors. I love the African bush. There's
Mm,
something very special. I've had lions sniffing around the tent. I've been, chased by a wild buffalo. I've had elephants sniffing me from head to toe from a few inches, and we can talk about some of those incidents at some time.
absolutely.
But also, everything that happened has been a growth progress for me. And when I came here and started teaching English as a second language, I found that the kids were getting the highest retention rates. I was the most popular teacher, and I had the highest scores, in class scores. And what am I doing? I'm just having fun with it.
That's it.
And that was the beauty. That was the beauty. And it took me a while to figure out. And then I went and studied NLP and hypnosis and therapy, but then I was applying it. But it was that ability to actually have fun. And to give you an example of it, you know how China, the school system is quite rigid. Well, I went into, I was, one of the first schools I went to was 11, 12, 13 year olds. And they had an English textbook which had been explained and taught to them in Chinese, which is quite common. But they couldn't really speak. So my job was to take those little bits and pieces and teach it in English, get them to speak English. So I was going through the thing, and this particular little section was about fire. There's a fire, and I'm getting them to recite and do the different dialogues. And then it came to the point where they were supposed to shout, "Help, help, the house is on fire," something like that. And there's this little meek voice, "Help, help, fire, help." So I said, "Nonsense. Is that the way you would really shout if there's a fire?" I said, "This is what will happen." I went to the door and opened the door, and I just screamed as loud as I could, "Help, help, fire." And they were like, "What the heck's going on?" They've never seen anything like this.
Wow.
But it was that ability to just be silly, if you like, and just have fun that made it work. And because they were having fun, they were learning 10 times more than they would have done otherwise. And that's me.
Yes.
I'm playful. I like to do these things. I enjoy that. And that's what I take into everything in life. And if I can have fun, do something stupid, it's wonderful. And, because I've obviously got older and got wiser, the other day I was taking my two children to kindergarten. And just outside the entrance to our complex, there's a little pond. It's only, a foot deep or so. And the kids love it. Kids on water, it's like iron filings and magnets. And I told them many times, don't play in the water and everything else. And, it never it never sinks in. Anyway, this morning, I'm walking there and I somehow managed to step back and fall into the pond.
Oh,
So as I'm going backwards, I shout, look at daddy, daddy's being silly. Flat. And, I came out of the water dripping from head to foot, but they loved it because I was being silly.
yes.
And that was it. I made it into a fun incident. And then I took them to school, dripping wet water dripping from head to toe. And, we were having a great talk. And I said to them, look, I keep telling you, now look what I've done. Look how silly I am to do this. But I made it into that fun situation so they could get a good lesson, but they weren't scared about daddy falling into the water. And it was great. And, after dropping off at kindergarten, they obviously had a lot of stuff to tell the teacher and their friends. I went home changed, and it was a beautiful day because I've been given this opportunity to teach them a beautiful lesson in the most effective way I could. I
Yes.
couldn't even have dreamed of that.
Yes. It's so powerful what you said, because I also noticed and learned the same thing, is that we all, whether you're 2 months old or 2,500 years old, we all want to have fun. Nobody wants to learn, especially through a dry and boring teacher just talking and this is book. No, nobody wants to do that. You will lose them faster than you can even blink. But make it fun, make it a challenge, make it interactive. And another thing that is very true and very related to that is, that inner child we have inside of you. That's a
Mhm.
fire of life. Never suppress that. Never, you know, constrain that, because this is your source of energy. The moment you silence, you suppress that, you might as well just call it a night and just and just die, because that inner child inside of you, that's where the joy, where the life, at least from my understanding, is really comes about. Keep that inner
Yeah,
child
and I think,
alive.
yeah, I think far too many people have been conditioned to imprison that inner child and not
Yes,
let it be free.
yes.
And that is a sad thing. And that's why they don't see possibility, because children see possibility everywhere. They don't see restrictions. They don't see this, but and they can have these wonderful dialogues with these imaginary people. They can see things. They can understand things, and we don't do that because we've locked the child away.
So you as a that's a perfect segue. A great question came to mind is you as an experienced educator, what can we do to ensure that kids never lose that inner child, that sense of that anything is possible? You know, when you're a kid, anything is possible. That you see them playing with imaginary fairies. They can be one
Mhm.
moment Superman, Spider-Man, Wonder Woman, being whatever they want. How can we keep that aspect, that vitality, that inner child in a child and a kid alive, so that they can keep that for the rest of their lives?
That's a massive question because a lot of it is controlled by the education
Mm,
system. And there's no requirement in a lot of these systems for children to be alive. It's a focus on passing a score
yeah,
or passing a test and getting a high score. There's no thinking. There's no
memorizing like a
ability to
monkey.
apply knowledge.
A
Yeah,
parrot. Yeah,
and I had students telling me that they weren't people; they were study machines. That was all.
yeah.
So the systems are not built for that, and consequently, the teachers are not interested. A lot of them are not, and this is a personal opinion, but a lot of them shouldn't be teachers. They shouldn't be near children
What can
because,
parents do? What can parents do to regain control of that? I mean, other than homeschooling their kids, what other options they have available to do that?
well, they need educating, about that as well, don't they? Because
Yes,
how many
yes.
parents tell the children, "Don't be silly, you can't do that," or this is not possible, or, and I think we've got to keep introducing the possibilities. We've got to keep them there. We've got to have the dialogues. But
Mhm.
as we were talking earlier, too many people, especially in big cities around the world, they're so focused on trying to pay the bills. They don't have time for anything else.
Absolutely,
So
yeah.
how can they have conversations with their children about possibility if they're locked into this treadmill?
Yes, yes,
So
absolutely.
that is something very, very important that we as parents have got to make space in our busy lives, in all the nonsense that we're there. We've got to make that space to actually have the conversations with our children and not look down on children. Look at the children as our educators. That's very important. And I'm lucky that my children teach me so many things about myself and about what is possible. But I could easily close that down. If I had had the children when I was younger, much younger, I probably would have done because I wasn't the person I am now. I hadn't had that opportunity to grow. So
That's
it's a
powerful.
blessing for me that it came so late.
That's powerful. What is the most powerful, a meaningful thing you've learned from your children so far?
That I am sometimes an absolute arsehole because I'm locked into my mentality and they make me wake up and say, okay, Stuart, there's so many ways of doing this. And my way is not the best way necessarily.
Yeah. Hmm.
And this is something that we have to think about. I mean, my youngest daughter, she's 4.5 years old, and she
Mm.
went to kindergarten, well, back to kindergarten last September. So she was nearly 4. She was born in November. So she goes back there, and they have a basketball competition, which is about bouncing the ball and then doing a little dance routine. It's not a game, but everything else. And she came home, we got her a basketball. She came home and very, 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 very quickly, 20 minutes or so, she's up to nearly 100 consecutive bounces without breaking her stride.
Wow.
And then I noticed, a day later, so I noticed she's doing the same thing, but she's got no shoes on. So I said, put your shoes on. And now in my mind, I would sit down, put the ball down, get my shoes, put them on, do it. No, 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 no. She's bouncing that ball like this. She just keeps on bouncing and she bends down and picks a shoe up and puts it on one foot, switches hands, does the same with the
Oh,
other foot, and she's
wow.
continued bouncing. Didn't stop, didn't break
Wow.
stride. And then a bit later, she had a runny nose. So I said, go and get a tissue and blow your nose. Same thing. Bounce, bounce, bounce,
And
bounce, 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 bounce. She gets the tissue. The box falls on the floor. So she's still bouncing. She bends down, picks it up, puts it on the counter, takes the tissue, blows her nose, and goes off to the rubbish bin and throws it in the rubbish bin. She didn't break stride.
wow. Congratulations, Stuart. You
Well,
might have a champion in your hand, my friend.
yeah, but the thing is, that is a beautiful example of I can.
Yeah. Possibilities. Yes. Endless
Yeah,
possibilities.
and
Yes.
that's the thing, and it's also a really great learning point for me because I can see that I can take that whole incident, encapsulate it, and keep it for that moment when she's struggling, and then reflect it back to her to show her what she actually achieved because it's a major milestone in her life. So those are things which are so beautiful. And if we're observant and we're open, we see these things and then we can take them and use them. But I can use that story in 100 different places, 1,000 different places to impact
Sure.
people.
Yes.
She gave me that. She gave me that.
Yes. Yes. Yes.
She doesn't
Powerful.
realize how wise she is.
Amazing. Love that. Wow. I love how this conversation has started. We haven't even, this was supposed to be just the introduction. So, wow. Beautiful. Love it. So we're going to dive deeper into that in a moment. But what I usually like to start with is to ask my guest a series of rapid fire questions to further get to know them as a person. Ready?
Okay. Yeah, I'm always ready.
All right. What makes you happy as a person?
At the moment, my children being in the bush, being chased by wild buffaloes, anything exciting like that.
Be
But
careful
it's,
what you
it's a
ask for.
strange thing, but yeah, it's a strange thing. But when I was chased by a buffalo, I came alive,
Oh,
and I'll
yes.
tell you that story at another time because you got more questions for me. But yeah,
All right. What makes you smile?
talking to you, talking to my children, being happy. I mean, the smiles come from so many places. And you know what? One thing that really is special is when I help someone get out of their own way,
Mm.
and they smile from the heart. That really
Oh,
brings
yes.
a beautiful smile on me, and it just makes me feel so
Sure.
special that I've helped somebody. So,
Absolutely.
there's so many ways we can grow smiles.
Absolutely. Now let's take the happiness factor a couple of notches higher. What makes your soul
Mhm.
set on fire? What makes your heart sing?
Again, that it goes back to being in the bush, being connected to nature, being present, and children.
Beautiful. Love that. Now, on the other side of the spectrum, what makes you sad and angry?
I get frustrated with myself because I'm a headstrong person. I'm an Aryan by nature, so we have these challenges. But you know what makes me really sad is to see people locked in and trapped into this existence and they don't see possibility. I
Mhm.
don't know whether I shared the flies in a jar experiment with you, but we can repeat it here quickly. Basically, what happened was some scientists took some flies and they put them in a glass jar with some food and then put a glass lid on top of it. And they became used to that environment. After a few days, they took the lid off and not a single fly tried to get out. That's where many people live. And they may see doors and they won't go and try and open them because they think they're locked, but they don't try. That's sad.
Or just like
But
the
we've got to
classic,
be ready.
it's like the classic story. What was it that people live in a cave and then in darkness, when one finally gets up, first people try to bring him down and hold him back, and then once he goes outside, he says, "Guys, come out! There's so much beautiful beauties outside." They say, "No, you're crazy. You've lost your mind. You've lost your mind." And they try whatever they can to bring the person back. I feel
Yeah,
the same way
yeah,
when I left Canada, when I started going my way as opposed to going the traditional way, going to law school with a traditional career. I started my business. People thought I was crazy. People thought I was throwing away and wasting my life away. My talents, my skills said no. This just like the saying, there's many ways to skin a cat, so to speak. but follow your heart at
Yeah.
the end of the day.
And there's more ways, of using your skills than people realize because they're still trapped into this blinkered thinking.
Yeah, absolutely. Wow, beautiful. Love that. Stuart, what scares you?
Heights,
What?
heights.
Heights. Okay.
It's
Why?
it's strange, and I am scared of heights. I'm trying to think the age. When I was maybe 10 or 12 or something like that, in England or in Wales itself, there's a little island off the north point of Wales called Anglesey, and there's a bridge across there, and it's an open suspension bridge. And I wouldn't go across that. It was going to a lighthouse or something. I wouldn't go across that, at that age. And then when I got to about 18 and 19, we went back there on our motorbikes, and I thought, okay, now I'm going to go across. Not a chance. I go near it, and my legs start turning to jelly and everything else. And when I went to South Africa, there's a beautiful viewpoint in the Eastern Transvaal called God's Window. And it's just a stunning view over the escarpment, looking over, good towards the Lowveld areas. I'm 3 meters pressed against the wall away from the edge, and I'm still scared. It's crazy. And yet, when I was first working in the UK, I would climb telegraph poles because that was my job. No problem. I could climb a telegraph pole, but I've got control. I'm holding on to it. I've got something solid in my arms. But when there's nothing there, it's a problem. I've been in helicopters. I've been in small planes over Vic Falls and places like that. And the plane can be outside looking down. It's not a problem because I've got something solid. But there's nothing there. Then I get scared. It's weird.
Yeah, no, I hear you. In some ways, I'm the same as well. Wow. Now, what would you say is your number one personal superpower?
Being able to connect at a deep level with somebody and
Mhm.
being able to hear really what the soul's saying and communicate with them, and understanding how I need to communicate with them to help them get out of their own way. It's no good me telling them this or that or that. I've got to connect at an energetic level, a special level. It's really beautiful.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I want to ask you a couple of deeper questions that I love asking.
Mhm.
And that is, what is the one thing that you used to do, that you used to value, that you don't value anymore?
One thing that I used to value, it's got to be, and it's not that I don't value it, it's just that the value has changed and I've
Mm,
grown out of it, was motorbikes. I used to love riding motorbikes. I'd go
uh,
out and do 300 miles in a day and just for a trip and everything else. But I got to a stage where that wasn't so important. I've done that. It's still nice, but it's not so important.
mhm. And now, vice versa. What is the one thing that you didn't value, but that now that you value?
One thing I didn't value was talking to people, communicating to people, because I didn't know how
Mm,
to when I was shy.
yes,
And now I do and have these beautiful conversations because I've become alive and allowed myself to open up to people.
absolutely. You mentioned shyness. That's something that I was painfully shy. I used to.
Mhm.
So you, Stuart, how did you overcome your shyness?
I don't think I've overcome it 100%. There's still times when I get shy
Mm,
and I'm a little bit sort of unsure what to say. But I think it has been that journey. And then meeting people and just understanding that, hey, there's a guy there or a girl there, a woman there, whatever, a person I can have a conversation with. And
yeah,
once we get out of our own way, it's easy because it's that initial start to the conversation, which is the challenge.
yeah.
Once that's broken, then it's easy because you're talking to a person
Hmm.
and you're connecting to that energy.
Yeah. For me, it's been traveling, especially being in China, a place I didn't speak the language, couldn't even read anything. Yeah, you really have to come out of your comfort zone to really even survive. That's one thing for me. And the other thing was podcasting. Those two things really helped me, just like you, not to completely, but to overcome like 80% of my shyness.
Yeah, and it's interesting, isn't it, that something which we call shyness can affect us in so many different ways and in so
Hmm.
many different areas. So there's something that we internally have to connect to allow us to break through that. And it could be that we need to challenge ourselves. It could be that we need just somebody to say, hey, this is Payman, this is Stuart, have a conversation. You both like this.
Yeah.
And someone does that, and we don't have shyness anymore because we've been introduced. There's a barrier been broken. So it's a
Absolutely.
very interesting field, shyness, and there's no one blanket thing. But I would suggest that if we allow ourselves to, we could see that in so many ways it is a blessing in disguise.
Absolutely. I can think of many, many times that my shyness actually was a blessing that actually saved me, protected me. So
Hmm.
I'm sure you
Yeah,
can relate to that as well.
yeah, and I think when we're locked in that shyness, we don't see it.
Mhm. Exactly. Yes. Beautiful. Let's move forward. Let's talk now. Let's talk now about your path. You enjoy traveling, right?
Hmm.
All right. But I'm gonna take you down a different type of traveling, down memory line. Go back to when you were a young
Hmm.
boy growing up. You know, when we're kids, people around us, especially parents, teachers, family, relatives, always ask us,
Hmm.
Stuart, what do you want to become when you grow up? What's your answer to that question as a young boy?
Well, I don't know whether it was asked me, as a young boy, but I do know that around 15 we had to plan what O levels we were taking, so then we could get the O levels to take us to A level to university and all
Mhm.
that sort of nonsense.
Yeah.
And all I knew at that time was that I wanted to do something with electricity. I was more involved or geared towards physics, metalwork, geometrical engineering, drawing, practical skills like that, and not really chemistry so much or biology. I think I did chemistry. So it was that. And then when it was time to leave, what do you want to do? What career do you want to have? I have no idea. I want to do something with electricity.
You didn't want to
And
become
that was it.
you didn't want to become growing up in the UK, you didn't want to become the next Beatles or become a football player.
Well, I didn't like the Beatles at that time. I liked the Stones. So
Ah, okay.
and it's interesting. I've never really followed football. I always liked rugby more.
Ah, okay, yes, I
But
remember.
I did have an introduction to rugby at school level, and then after about
Mhm.
6 months or so, my parents moved across the other side of Manchester to the north of Manchester, and the school I went to didn't have any rugby; it was football, and I hated that. So as soon as I had the opportunity to, I changed to badminton.
Ah, so you grew up in around Manchester, yet you didn't follow Manchester United. Wow, that's amazing.
Or City,
Oh
or
yeah,
Liverpool, because that's just down the road. And I went to one match, and I think when England won the World Cup in '66,
yeah,
it was exciting because that was the time we won it. And I remember
yeah,
people like Georgie Best and Bobby Charlton and
yeah.
Dennis Law and all the old school footballers of that time. But it never really attracted me. I preferred rugby and
Yeah.
cricket, obviously.
Wow, amazing, amazing. Now, what was your relationship with school? Did you love it or did you hate it?
I didn't hate it. It was just something I had to do. But
Mm,
I was, trying to develop my identity at the time. And because of the shyness, it was a question of, hey, I want people to look at me. I want people to see how good I am, because that was a way I could I was thinking, unconsciously that I could step outside that. It didn't happen. And I ended up becoming a little bit of a rebel. But I didn't hate school. I didn't love it. I enjoyed sometimes some of the classes. Some of the teachers were really good, and I enjoyed the practical stuff of metalwork and geometrical engineering drawing. But it was never a love-hate relationship in that respect, like some people have.
Was there any subject or topics that you did not like at school? In school?
There was a subject which not I didn't like. It was the teachers destroyed it for me, and
Oh
that's French.
yes. Hmm.
I went, my father had to go to Italy for quite a few months and on business. So we moved to London to be with my father's eldest sister. And there's a long story there, about her being during the war years and the refugee status, and that she was the eldest sister, so she had to become the mother and all that type of thing. That's an interesting thing. But we stayed with her whilst my father was away, and the school I went to, they had French, and I was very good at French. It was beautiful. And
Wow.
then when we came back, and then we got to the high school, if you like, we had 4 French teachers in less than 18 months. And the last person was an Irish gentleman trying to teach us French with an Irish accent. And he wasn't a very good teacher.
I can imagine that.
And yeah, and as a person, he wasn't a particularly nice person either. And we went to a parents' evening once, and my mother came back after and said, "That is the most obnoxious person I've ever met in my life." So when it came to the end of school years, he put down on my report, Stuart has set out to fail this subject and has succeeded in doing so. And that was the only subject I ever failed. And that's why, because it was destroyed to me as a language, as a
Yeah,
subject,
sure.
because of the teachers. And that happens quite often, I think, to
Happened
a
to
lot of
me.
students. Mm-hmm.
That's happened to me in my math. I used to be good in math up until grade 6, and the teacher was not. I didn't, and I couldn't connect with him, and that put me off with math. And as a result of that, I always after that I always struggled with math because I lost the interest.
Yeah,
And
and
if you don't pay attention one year, then every is going to become more and more difficult, and it's going to be harder and harder for you to follow and to catch up.
yeah, and you also get labeled, which makes it worse,
Yeah,
and that's not good either.
especially at
And
that
that
age.
goes back
Yes.
again to, yeah, and that goes back to what we were saying about how to keep people engaged and everything else. A lot of it is the personalities of the teachers who've got to get outside themselves,
Yeah, absolutely.
and that's a challenge.
Yeah, absolutely. What kind of students were you? Imagine that we were in the same class in grade 10 or 11. What kind of student were you? Were you the shy, obviously, or were you more like the happy, the nerd, the life of the class?
Well, I was more the rebel, and
Ah,
mixed with that type of group of people. As I say, I liked the Stones, and that was in the 70s
oh
when the
yes.
Stones were at their height.
Oh yeah.
So I was trying to emulate those guys
Mhm.
in some ways.
Oh yes. Oh yes.
And the Beatles were too clean and civilized, if you like.
Oh yes. Oh yes. What was your very first job? And do you remember how much you got paid for the first job that you did?
I'll never forget the first job. It was wonderful. I started work when I left school and decided to get a job. I had two jobs I was offered. One was the Navy as a petty officer,
Wow.
and the other was post office telecoms as it was then, and that's British Telecom in the UK. And I thought to myself, okay, I really want to go to the Navy and be a petty officer. There's beautiful opportunities, etc., and there's travel, there's the sea, everything else. But I want to get a motorbike.
You wanted to
And
what?
if I go to the Navy, I want to get a motorbike.
Ah,
And
okay.
if I go to the Navy, I won't be able to ride the thing because I'll be away most of the time.
Yeah.
So I went to the post office, and it was so interesting. I mean, we started work on a Thursday, and there's a whole apprenticeship attached to it. We started work on the Thursday. Friday morning, I get up and there's a check in the post for me, a gyro check with my first day's salary. It was about something like £10 or £11.
Wow.
One day, there's the money.
Nice. Nice.
Through the post, no less. Through the post, no less.
Wow. That's awesome.
So it was crazy, I couldn't believe it. I went to work the next day smiling like he.
So there's two ways I can take this conversation now, but you mentioned that you followed your heart and you wanted to do something related with the motorbikes. So
Mhm.
let's jump a little bit further at do you now looking back at your life, because one of the things I understood since I had my awakening is that number one, we are where we meant to be, and number two, where we are now prepares us for the next step in our journey. So when you decided to not go to the Navy, but go to the post office and ride your bike, did that in some way, shape, or form prepared you for what was to come, and especially around your journey in Africa? When you were in Africa, how were you traveling? Were you biking around, or were you?
I had actually had a 4x4 there, an Android,
Ah, okay, yeah, okay.
traveling around. I was in the middle of the desert. It was the days before GPS or anything else like that. So we
Mm.
had a physical map and a compass, and
Oh
we were in the middle
yes,
of Kalahari and places like that with a map. But yeah, I mean, to answer the question directly, everything we do prepares us for the next step. And what a lot of people I find do is they make a decision today, and then it didn't work out the way they planned it would work out. So then they start judging and criticizing themselves and saying, I shouldn't have made that decision.
hmm,
Rather than seeing it's the decision that's got them to where they are now. And there's been a lot of growth in ways that they may not necessarily understand. And when I was about 17, I think it was, maybe, yeah, 17 or 18, I'd just been to Morocco for 2 weeks, a 2 week holiday. And I came back, it was the 1st of May or the beginning of May in the UK. And at that time, people didn't have the sunbeds and everything else. So there weren't many people with a suntan. And I came in, into the pub one evening, and there's an old guy standing at the bar. He must have been 60, 65, maybe 70 years old. And I'll never forget the pub. It's called the Dog and Partridge. But I walk in, and as I walk in, he just stops and he just looks at me. And he said, lad, he says, that's looking mighty brown. Where's that been? So I said, oh, I've just been to Morocco. And then he looked even deeper, but it was going inside, and there was such a wistfulness look on his face. He says, Morocco. I wish I could have done that when I was your age.
wow,
And I said to myself, thank you. That's the most beautiful, beautiful lesson I've ever had. I didn't say anything to him in that respect, but
yeah,
I'm never going to get to your age and be sat at the bar, be fixtures and fittings at the bar, and look back with regret. So,
yes,
whatever decisions, whatever journeys, whatever things that happen in life, I never regret them. I may not like them,
yeah.
but there's always something there for me to grow from, or for me to see how much I've grown through it.
Did you know
And
that
that's the difference.
Did you know that guy? It was
Sorry?
just that guy that you met.
No, no, no.
Wow,
It was just put
random.
into
Oh,
my
wow.
place. I mean, it was a regular pub we used to go to, so maybe I've seen him before, but we never had that any interaction before because, as I say, he was part of the bar. That was his stool. He go there every night, and that was his life.
So, do you
And
think that
no
that
way.
interaction with that guy was probably one of the most influential encounters, even though a very short interaction in your life, to make you understand and realize something extremely powerful?
Yeah, I mean, why was it put there if not? I mean, yes, because how many people do you know that look back with regret? I shouldn't have done this, or wish I had the opportunity, or. And I mean, I know many people like that still. And I've never looked back with regret. Sometimes we have to catch ourselves and say, hey, look, there's lessons there. There's something you've grown. Maybe you don't know it now, but in a couple of years or 10 years or whatever, it will come out when it's necessary. And again, it's going back to that stories, collector of stories. But, we collect them without realizing it sometimes. And, you've got that pool behind you. And I always say that, that's your reservoir of wisdom that you can tap into and share or use for yourself anytime you need to.
Wow, beautiful. Now, you mentioned that at the very young age, you went to Africa. Tell us, what took you the first time? What made you decide, hey, I want to go on an adventure to Africa?
Well, about 3, maybe 4 or 5 years ago, before then, rather, not ago,
Yeah.
uh, I got a book. It was the first book I bought online, from I don't know if it was Amazon or whatever, but it was a book. No, I think it was a book I actually saw in one of the newspapers because that was before Amazon was born.
Yeah.
And it was called, um,
Was it The Lonely Planet? No.
No, no, it was nothing like that. It was something like Western kingdoms, Western people, but it was about the west of Africa, West African kingdoms, and it was about the peoples, the different tribes, and everything else there, and their customs and stuff like that. And
Mhm.
I'm just trying to think of the name of it. It's there, but it's
Yeah,
not there. Anyway,
happens. Yeah.
that was something that really interested me. And when I was given the opportunity to go, my brother actually had gone to South Africa and was working in one of the banks, and he said he's going to do an overland trip, but that
Wow.
never materialized because he doesn't get organized as quickly. So I organized something for myself,
Hmm.
went out there to visit him, spent a month in South Africa, and then did this overland trip. It took 6 months driving back through Africa to the UK, and that was an eye opener. There were so many lessons there which I didn't realize at the time, and so many wonderful experiences. But just being connected to nature every single night, we were camping. Every single day, we were looking for water somewhere. And one of my jobs, in the group was to be the water in charge of the water. So I always made sure we had full water bottles because that's important.
Hmm.
Whereas other people, they struggled and they forgot. But that was something which just was natural for me. And as I say, when I got back to the UK, it actually started a little bit before when we got through the Sahara and went to Gibraltar and then to Spain and France. I started getting this feeling of missing something. And it,
What
it
was
really
that?
hit me when I got off the ferry.
What was
Oh,
that?
I mean, Africa has a special energy. There's a special,
Yes.
it's just something about it. And I realized that we were getting headed back towards, should we say, civilization and my old life back in the UK, and it wasn't for me. So as I got off the ferry, I said to myself, "No, I'm going back," and I made it happen 3 months later.
Isn't it funny that we feel a lot more alive in the so-called
Yep,
wild, wild countries that in the
yeah,
safety, comfort of the West, we feel almost constrained and suppressed and controlled. I think that's how I feel.
yeah, and also the people you meet. They may have nothing. They may live in the most rudimentary places or have the hardest life, but they're also the happiest, the most joyful, the most honest people.
Exactly. Exactly.
And that's one of the beauties of it.
Hmm. So you went, so you left the UK. Did you fly? Did you take the ferry? Did you drive all the way to Africa? How did you travel?
So we flew back. We flew via Zambia. We actually flew first to Italy, and it's an interesting journey because we got on the plane and we were supposed to be having a stopover to pick a couple of people up in Italy,
Yeah.
and the plane was a DC-10, and we're on the runway and we start accelerating, and then the guy slammed his brakes on. So everybody's looking around at each other. What's fallen off? Because they had a reputation at that time, the DC-10s. And what it turned out was that there was an air traffic control strike,
Oh,
and they weren't sure about, flight paths and stuff like that, or something along the lines. So they had to wait, and then they
wow.
decided to put an extra 40 tons of fuel on board just in case.
Wow.
It's crazy. You're sitting on a plane and you just can't picture 40 tons of fuel. Connected to your car. What's that in gallons? But they had to do that. And then we flew off to Zambia, and that was back in '86. So Zambia wasn't quite as developed as it is
Yeah.
now, possibly. But, we got off the international airport, and we are supposed to be having a connecting flight back to South Africa. And it was so funny. We get there, and as I say, it was still, not working very well, most things, and there were no signs telling you when the next flight is. There was nobody. It was like deserted. And one part of the airport complex was not an army, an air force base. And we're hanging around, and we're waiting. And there was only three planes on the runway, one of which was our plane.
Hmm.
And we knew that another plane that was there was for a different group of people. But as we're waiting there, one of the people who'd been on the plane with us decided to take photographs.
Mm.
And in a lot of African countries, or a lot of underdeveloped countries, there are certain places you don't take photographs. Airports
Mm,
being one of them, especially when there's an Air Force base there. And
yeah.
this guy, taking some photos, and then all of a sudden, this giant, about 6 or 8 foot tall, just materialized from thin air. Nobody had seen him. He just materialized and he didn't say anything. He just looked at the guy and put his hand out like that.
Without saying a word.
And just not saying a word. He just put his hand out, and the guy sort of, he almost shattered his pants, if you excuse the expression. And he gave him the camera. This was in the days of the cameras, film. And he
Just
took the film out
destroy
the
it.
back and he just destroyed it and gave him the camera back and then disappeared again. Gone.
No
Just
word.
like that. No word, nothing.
Welcome to
But that was a
Africa.
beautiful lesson. Yeah, that was a beautiful lesson in and of itself. And then, after that little bit of excitement, we're still waiting. And then we found a woman who's walking around, and she had an air hostess type uniform on. So we said, "Hey, where's our plane?" And she said, "No, it's that one there." And we look out the window, and there's a plane taking off. What the heck?
Wow.
And she said, "No, it'll be back in about
Run,
20
run,
minutes.
run,
It's just
run. You
going
can
for a
catch
test
it.
flight." No, she said, "It's just going for a test flight."
What does that mean?
Oh, no, we're not going to run for this car at that plane. So, eventually when it came back and we got on board and we were flying from Zambia to South Africa, I think everybody was sat there a little bit nervous just in case the plane didn't make it.
So when the
Not
flight
very
when the
scary.
plane landed, did everybody start clapping like in the movies? And kissing everybody, hugging the person next to you.
It's not the sort of thing you expect. Someone to say, "There's the plane, just going for a test flight, be back in 20 minutes."
That's awesome. That's awesome. Wow.
Doesn't inspire confidence, does it?
So when you went to South Africa, did you have any friends, any contact there, or just went blindly? Just pure adventure.
Well, my brother was there, so that was
Ah, okay.
okay. But, that I would have gone there anyway if there was nobody else there.
Hmm,
And I had to wait. I got a job and I had to wait 3 months before I was allowed to get a visa because they have to advertise it locally. But
sure.
I was offered a job. I was in telecoms and microwave radio, so there weren't many people locally who could do it.
Hmm.
And I went there from the UK in December, just before Christmas,
Somewhere there, yeah.
to South Africa in the midsummer, and I spent my first Christmas around the swimming pool. It just seemed crazy. It just seemed crazy. It doesn't. It didn't feel like Christmas whatsoever.
Yeah. Yeah.
But
Wow.
yeah, it was great. It was wonderful, and from then onwards, it was just more and more adventures, etc., as happens in life. And along with the adventures, so many lessons and things like that. I mean, yeah, I've got a sad but a very funny story at the same time. And it's sad
Uh,
for a reason. I'll tell you why. My ex-wife and I were taking our two dogs out for a walk. And then one of the dogs in the back of our house, there was what they call a scrape, which is like a little stream and some wooded areas and stuff like that. And one of the dogs just went straight to the stream. And we found the dead body in the water.
Person, a
So
human?
that's the very sad part of it. Yeah, human being. And
Wow.
that was the sad part. The dog found her. And obviously she's dead, so there's nothing we can do. But we called the police. We got the police over, and the flying squad came out. Four monstrous giants armed to the teeth. The flying squad in South Africa at that time, they had maybe 2 years before they were taken off and put through the PTSD and all sorts of stuff because it was really horrendous pressure they were under. But they came out and they said they wanted a statement, but it wasn't a very easy place to take a statement. So we had two dogs, and it was me and my ex-wife. And I said, okay, you go back with Kasani, who's our English Bull Terrier, who's the guy who found her, the person, and I'll take the other dog, Marigold, back home and I'll walk home. And I get home and the police had gone. They got the statements and everything else, and they were off to the next case. But what was so funny was the dog in the car. We've got a smallish car, and there's four giants in the car, and Heidi's pinned in the middle between on the back seat between the two giants, either side of her, and the dog sat on her lap, and the dog sat there like this, as dogs do. But he had a character, this guy, and he sat there, and then he just looks down, and he goes, and he just looks down at the guy's gun, and the gun was, on the right hand hip, so it's pushing in the leg of my ex-wife. And then he stops and looks at the guy dead in the face, and then he looks down again. And Heidi said to him, I said, I think you better move your gun. So he sheepishly took the gun and put it the other side. And then he was okay. The dog's okay. He's looking forward. And then the guy in the front on the passenger side, all of a sudden, turned around to say something. But he did it so quickly. And he was just halfway to opening his mouth, and there's this dog's face, nose to nose, staring him in his eyes.
Wow.
Didn't try and hurt him, didn't try anything. He just said, look, I've got control. You better watch it, lad. And, Heidi was breaking out into laughter. It was so funny. The guy didn't know what to say. He just turned around sheepishly and sat there. But
Yeah.
after that, they were all good guys. It was beautiful, But
Yeah.
that's how that dog was, Kasani. He was a very, very special dog. And when we got him, he chose us. He chose us.
Absolutely. Yes.
Yeah.
That was a very
So,
special. Yes.
yeah, so many stories. I mean, we got another bull terrier, a puppy, once, and one night they sleep in the bedroom with us. One night we hear this growling about 2 o'clock in the morning. What the heck's going on? Put the light on, and there's Kasani lying down, but his head's raised, and the little puppy, about 8 weeks old, is sat on its head. And he was just growling at this little puppy to say, "Get off my head," but he wasn't going to shake it. He wasn't going to do anything untoward towards it. He was just talking to it. It was so funny.
Wow.
Dogs have these characters, and there's so many stories I can share with you. But we
Yeah.
need to be here till next Christmas. So
Your stories about Africa seem absolutely fascinating. Or did you write a book about that?
I'm still busy writing the book,
Please.
and
That would be an
there's so
amazing book.
many lessons,
Yeah.
so many lessons there. I mean, a beautiful lesson about business I was given
Mm.
was when we were in Kenya, and we were in the Masai Mara area of Kenya, and we were sat there around the campfire in the wild, where the big five live and everything else. And we were sat there, dark night, and we were just warming our toes around the campfire as we do. And three Maasai warriors just materialized out of nowhere.
Wow.
It's one of those WTF moments, like that. But they were friendly. They were great guys. And I saw this as an opportunity to get a Maasai spear because I'd always wanted one. And when I was in Nairobi, they were too expensive, the tourist shops. And I thought, no, this is it. This is it. And before I left for Africa, I've been told to bring barter goods. So at that time in 86, electronic calculators, scientific calculators were the bee's knees. And I had one that I brought for bartering, and I thought, this is it. This is it. So I rushed to the tent, got this calculator, took it out, and I said, look, I'd like to trade this for your spear. So the guy took it off me. He's about 25 or so. And he was very, very gentlemanly. And he took it off me, and he looks at it, and he starts making some calculations and everything else. And then he puts it back in the plastic bag and puts it back in the box and said, look, it's wonderful. But what use is it to me?
Exactly. Oops. Yeah.
And I just went, and I disappeared. I shut up. I went back inside. I couldn't believe how stupid I'd become and everything else. And not only hadn't I considered how useful it would or wouldn't be to him, because I was so fixated on getting the spear, but I didn't even think, and I only thought about this later, much later, where the heck's he going to get batteries from to put it in it if it goes flat? If you're going to do business with somebody, Or if you want a friendship, you've got to provide real value to them, and you've got to understand what is valuable to them. And that's a lesson that it's taken me a long time to realize from that incident, because I locked myself down. And what I should have done was said, okay, look, I'm sorry, I was so stupid. And then I would have been able to have a much better conversation and things with him, and not gone down that nonsense route that I was going down. But I didn't. So, that's a big lesson that you get from
Sure.
life, but you never know it's going to come. It just hits you out of the blue. And sometimes you can rise to the occasion, or you can shrink away like I did. And I shrank away because I was shy and stupid and still growing and still, thinking of myself.
Some of the best lessons we learn in the real world, like just like you said, this was about providing value, but also about the importance of making sure your product is a good fit to the market and to your
Mhm.
audience. In this case, even
Yeah.
though the electronic calculator was amazing, state of the art for you, but for him was, what is this? What can I use that for? He was just scratching
Yeah.
his head.
Yeah.
No, thank you. It was
And the thing about him was he was so noble. He wasn't arrogant. He wasn't nasty. He was
mm,
just so noble, and that made it so much worse because he had a purity about him which I didn't have at that time.
that's powerful. Yeah. Wow. So you said, okay, so then you started working in South Africa, and then how long did you work in South Africa? And from the moment you arrived until you started actually traveling across Africa.
No, the moment I arrived, I spent a month traveling through Africa, and then I did
Okay.
these, sorry, across South Africa, around South Africa, and then I did 6 months going back to England, and then I came back, and it took me 3 months just to have my first day of work, and then basically 18 months living and working there, doing different jobs and things like that, and then, as I say, things fell apart, and I was offered an opportunity to come to China.
So when you were in Africa, did you at any time, how was safety back then?
Safety was probably as bad as it is now. You
Mm,
don't realize it. I mean, we had armed response patrols that we contracted to on a monthly basis. We had high fences, razor wire on the fences. Most people had two dogs at least. And, some of the people actually had a security gate between the living area and the sleeping area in their house.
wow.
And, safety is a big thing, but it becomes part of the routine, the way of doing life. You drive up to your driveway, you've got electric gates. You look, you don't stop. You look, you've got your eyes open as you're driving up and looking around and seeing who's hiding behind the tree or this or that, or who's going to
Oh,
slip in
wow.
with you. You don't, like a lot of people do, especially in Asia, walk around with your cell phone in your hand, looking, here you are. Or, you're in your car, you don't have anything valuable in view. Because if you're in a traffic jam, somebody might just walk past and take a spark plug and smash the window, take it and walk off.
Speaking
There's
of,
so many different ways there.
I heard that in South Africa, stopping at the traffic light is optional, especially at night. You don't stop because I heard and read people going with machetes and just try to.
Well, in theory, you're supposed to stop, obviously.
Mm,
But
yeah.
yeah, I mean, people, you've got to have a whole different mindset. And, one of the things that you don't notice whilst you're there is how much, should we say, stress it's causing you. It's when you leave that you realize that you can relax. And coming here from there, I mean, this place was so safe. Walk around 2 o'clock in the morning without even thinking about it, without even batting an eyelid. Obviously, you still got that level of observation that people don't see. I mean, for instance, I was in a very busy tourist area, and I said to my wife, just watch that guy there. He's a pickpocket, he's a thief, and so is that one there. And they saw me talking about them, so they disappeared
Mm,
because,
you're prepared.
I understood that. I understood that because I'd been immersed in that environment for so long. And in fact, one time I was in South Africa with one of the people I used to work with, I had to pick him up in a place called Hillbrow, and Hillbrow is not a good place to go to. It had a bad reputation. So I pick him up there, and then we were going out on a drive to go to another company, maybe a couple of 100 Ks away or something like that, and do some work and then come back. But he said to me, he said, look, that guy there, that's a pickpocket. That's a pickpocket. He's a pickpocket. And so is that one. And see that car there? That's their boss.
Mm,
And
wow.
he was immersed in that even more than me because he
Sure.
had to work
Yeah.
every single day.
Wow.
So that level is with you, but you don't think anything about it because it's the norm.
I felt the same
You don't have an option.
when I was in Brazil, especially in Rio. It's pretty much the same.
Hmm.
You have to be
Yeah.
always on your guards, and yeah, that's one of the things I really love about Asia, because in Asia is probably the safest place in the world.
Yeah. You can see women walking down the streets at 1 o'clock, not concerned.
Yeah, just nice,
Nobody's bothering them.
nice watch, money in your
Right?
pocket. Even if you're drunk 3 o'clock in the morning, you
Yeah.
know, you'll be okay.
It's strange how that difference is, isn't it? And how, I mean, we were talking about London, we were talking about the UK. I go back there now and don't feel safe.
Same thing in Toronto. We stay outside of Toronto. I haven't gone inside the city because it's getting out of hand.
Yeah, it's it's crazy. It's
Yeah,
crazy. I mean, it's not saying that there's no crime. It's just that
sure.
there's. It's almost like respectful crime.
You
If you
really have to
just
look
pick up.
for it. You really have to be beyond
Yeah.
reckless. Really
Hmm.
look for it and tempt the devil. To say, "Hey, come get me." Even for it to
Yeah.
come to you. Yeah.
But in Africa and other countries, yeah, it's there. I mean, I was talking to a lady the other day, and she had a home invasion about 3 days before we were on the call.
Wow.
A friend of mine who I used to work for before I left, he was murdered. The guys came into his
Oh
factory
no.
and shot him. And if I had still been there, because it was not that long after I left there, I would have been doing that, and it could have been me. But it's on your mind as a
Yeah.
possibility, but
Yeah.
it's only there to increase your awareness. It doesn't stop you from doing life. You just
Life
have
goes
that.
on.
Okay, I've got to keep my eyes open. Got to be a bit more careful. That type of thing.
The show must go on. You gotta still keep going and not get
Yeah.
fear overwhelm you. Absolutely. Wow.
Mhm. So when you leave those areas and that environment, it's like there's an invisible weight off your shoulders, and it's difficult to put into words.
I felt that way in a way when I was living in China in Hangzhou with all the cameras around you. I didn't like that feeling of always being surveilled, always being
Watched.
watched. Yeah, always. And especially as a foreigner, pretty much
Hmm.
once every 2 months, I had to go. What do you call it? I was doing visa runs. I had to go back and report myself to local police station to get a stamp on my
Hmm.
passport, as if I
Hmm.
was a criminal. I mean, that's something that really was, at first you say whatever, but after a while you say, why do I have to do this? I'm not doing anything wrong. Why? It doesn't make any sense. And
Hmm.
when I left China, when I left to Hong Kong, and that I didn't have to do that, I felt just like you mentioned, weight was lifted, even though I didn't go anywhere near any of the, dangers that you had to go through living in South Africa. You know?
Yeah, it is that sort of level of stress which is introduced into your daily
Yeah.
life, isn't it? I mean, that's the thing. And I mean, back in the UK, there's a lot of people being mugged. There's a lot of people homes being burglarized and broke into. And I remember my parents, they had a burglar, and they had a double-story house, and they caught him hanging out of the bathroom window, trying to get out, a small window. And my father actually chased him. He never caught him, but he chased him for quite a while. And when they got the police out, the police castigated my father. for chasing him, said he's stupid and everything else.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
And the attitude is, you're insured. Don't worry about it. Let it be, and allow us to do our job. But the reality is, they wouldn't have found that guy,
They don't
or
care.
probably wouldn't have done. And even if they had have done, the court system would have given him a pat on the back and said, "Don't do anything." I
Yeah.
mean, if you are accosted by a mugger and you hurt the guy, you're in more trouble than he is.
This is nonsense. Yeah.
Yeah, because you're using excessive force to restrain him.
I heard even crazy stories in the US, like there was case of thieves, breaking into somebody's house. The person was on holiday, and the thief got stuck in the house for the weekend. And then the thief
Mhm.
goes on to sue the owner of the house. Why was he absent for a weekend, and why he couldn't get out? I mean, that defies any logic.
Yeah. I had a similar thing where a thief tried to break in through a skylight and fell down and broke his leg.
Yeah. And now it's your fault.
And he sued them for loss of earnings because there was no warning sign on the skylight. And he got it.
Holy smoke. Now, this world is going, just like they said, the
It's
sky has
crazy.
fallen over our heads.
Mm. It's crazy. So, it makes you wonder how much further the pendulum's got to swing that way before it comes back and gets to a reasonable position.
Yeah. Well,
Because if you think of the Middle Ages with all the torture and all the nonsense that was going on then maybe that was a bit too extreme. But now it's gone way across the other side that the victim has got less rights than the perpetrator of the crime,
yeah,
and especially with assaults on women.
that's crazy indeed.
It's crazy. It's really nonsense.
I'm fascinated by Africa. That's the only country, along with Australia, continent I haven't been to. So after South Africa, you left and you started traveling. Tell us about your travels around Africa.
How long do you want me to take?
Oh, we will do a few episodes on that, yes, because there's so
Yeah.
much. We have another 10, 15 minutes left. I have a call at noon. So,
Okay. So we traveled from South Africa to Botswana. We couldn't go into Zimbabwe at the time because there was still all that stuff with the Matabeleland area and Joshua and Nkomo, with all the nonsense between the two tribes or two main tribes. So we went into Botswana. We drove through the Kalahari Desert, and that is an interesting desert. It's a
mm,
desert full of trees.
mm,
That's really weird. But we also went through it at the time where there was a lot of they'd had a lot of rain, and there was a lot of flowers everywhere. But the reason the trees are there is that they've got very deep roots which go to an underground river, because the Okavango River drains into the Devon, desert. It's an ancient sea. It doesn't get the rainfall, but they've got the deep roots which have adapted, so they're able to grow there. But it's beautiful. And one of the most memorable things for me at that time, because this is the first time I've been out of the UK into a desert area and really been camping in there, was the sky.
it's at night.
We Yeah, we were like this because the stars were so low. We didn't want to bang our heads or anything else. I couldn't believe it. It
We're
felt
able to
like the
see the
stars were just above the
You're able to see the Milky Way and all that.
Milky Way, the stars, the whole bang shoot. I've never seen so many stars in my
This
life.
is
And
one of my
as we
ultimate
got further
dreams.
night, yeah,
Wow.
as we got further north, we were able to see the North Star and the Southern Cross in the same sky because we were
My
close to the
God.
equator. But
Wow.
that sky was, the stars were so bright, there were so many, and the Milky Ways there, everything, that it felt like you're going to bang your head on the ceiling. So we were sort of unconsciously dipping down to go there. It was weird, but it's beautiful. It really was beautiful. And we had, so many great adventures there. And that was the first time that I'd slept out in the wilds of Africa. I'd camped before, But the first time I stepped out in the wilds of Africa, and we had lions visit us at night time and
Lions.
sniff around the tents. Yeah. And the first few times it happened, I was lying there, toilet paper stuffed in my ears, keeping as still as I could. And if I breathed, it was like a roaring torrent of noise. And I was scared that the lions would have it because they're sniffing the tent. And in the morning, you get up after a not very peaceful sleep, where you see these big pug marks around the tent. But the funny thing is, we got used to it and we became accustomed to it. And we missed it when it didn't happen.
So
It's
the
crazy,
lions
but
were looking for what? We're looking for food or
they were just investigating. Lions are scavengers as much as hunters, and
uh,
they're opportunistic. So if we'd have been lying outside, they may have taken a chunk of us. But because we're inside the tent, they didn't recognize the tent as being food. So they were just curious, shall we say.
ah,
Because if they wanted to, they could destroy the tent, no problem. I mean, a
sure.
fully grown male lion is pretty formidable.
Oh yeah.
So, that's the thing. And then we went from there into Malawi and stayed on the shores of, excuse me, Lake Malawi.
Did you have a
We had
guide
some
with
beautiful
you?
times in between.
Guide with maybe a
We,
gun
we were with
next to
an
you?
organized tour. So there
Okay.
was 18 of us on this truck. And the guys who were in charge of the truck, they knew what was going on. They were very well organized. But they included us in the planning. They got the maps out every night. And this is where we are. And we had, turns at checking the compass and stuff like that. So we were sort of part and parcel of the planning. And there were discussions where we wanted to go. But I was young and crazy then, and we got to Malawi, and we started drinking Malawi gin on the shores of Lake Malawi. And Lake Malawi is beautiful, but there's a funny thing about Malawi gin. It makes one leg shorter than the other.
Why?
I'm not sure, but after a bottle or two of it, we were just walking around in circles.
Wow.
So it was crazy. But and then I put the tent up beforehand and collapsed in the tent, as you do, type of thing, after too much of the alcohol and that type of thing. But what I hadn't realized was there was some little thorn holes in the ground sheet of the tent, and a whole lot of ants came in. And I woke up with ants in my eyes, in my ears, in my throat, up my
Oh
nose,
no.
everywhere. Fortunately, they weren't biting ants, but they were uncomfortable enough anyway. And with a hangover, that's not a good way to wake up in the morning.
Ah, yeah. Wow.
Yeah, but one of the guys who was with us, he had a much worse experience. He's sleeping out. He didn't want to sleep in the tent. He was sleeping out there in a mosquito net.
Oh
And he
no.
must have rolled over in the middle of the night and leant against the net, because from here all the way down to his hip and halfway across the back were just thousands of mosquito bites. How he didn't scratch his skin off, I don't know. But they must have had a feast when he was lucky he didn't get malaria or anything. But it was raw for a long time.
He was lucky they didn't get a lion visit you guys at that time, you know? It would have been a snack for the lion.
There's so many things when we're young and we get used to the things. I mean, when we were in the game reserves of Kenya, we had a local guide who's one of the rangers of that area, and he said he knows where there's a buffalo carcass that some lions have just killed, and he took us there. But because we were in a small Land Rover, we were in a big truck, and it was very wet, we got bogged down. And then we have to get off, dig the car out, dig the truck out, and get sand ladders and put them underneath. And we had, a couple of people on the roof looking around. We checked out where the lions were and everything else was. And then one of the lions we hadn't noticed was right next to the truck, and all the commotion and noise woke it up. And obviously it's peacefully sleeping. So it wakes up into its, defensive mode, ready to attack anything that's there. And somebody saw it and they shout, and everyone's diving back on the truck, through the windows, the works, anything like that. And the ranger, he didn't have a gun or anything on him. He just picks up a spade and he's like, this is going to bang it on the end of the nose if it comes close to them.
Wow.
That's a fully grown lion. You know, that's how it was. And then, we saw quite a few more lions, and then we got the truck going. And I was on the party of the sand ladders with a couple of other guys because they're pretty long, heavy things. And the truck goes, and it can't stop because if it stops, it gets bogged down again. So it has to keep going, and it's like 5, 6, 7, 800 meters further and further until it found firm ground. And we're stood there, and this lion head's popping up everywhere. You think, what
Wow.
the?
Wow.
So we just looked at you as, okay, shrug shoulders and pick up the sand ladders and just walk off to the truck.
Wow.
It was, you can't relate to, the lack of feeling of being in danger because we become accustomed to it. It was our norm, that type of thing. And when we got back afterwards, the ranger said to us, he said, hey, if you want to go for a beer, because we were camping in the middle of the Bundu, if you want to go for a beer, the lodge is that way. It'll take you about, 40 minutes to an hour to walk there, but just keep going. You can't miss it. You'll see the lights.
No, thank
So
you.
we had our food. Yeah, we had our food. There's no fences. There's nothing. We had our food. And then a couple of us decide we're going to go and have a beer.
Oh, you were one of them?
So we just, yeah, of course, damn right I am. So we're just walking and we've got our torches. And then we're looking around and there's some eyes. And then we're trying to discuss what eyes, because all the animals have different color eyes at night time. And we're trying to discuss what it was.
Wow. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's pitch black.
Do you have
And
any
one
weapons
of the
with
people
you?
who's
Any weapons? Any guns?
no guns, nothing, just walking. One of the guys walked into the back leg of a giraffe. And then eventually we see the lights of the lodge. We get there and there's no fences and there's big signs. Guests must stick to the floodlit pathways because wild animals are dangerous. And we looked at each other and said, what the heck? And we
Sorry,
just walked
guess
about
must do
a
what?
mile.
Gus must do what?
Stick the floodlit pathways. Don't leave the floodlit pathways because
Ah,
the wild animals are dangerous. And we
ah.
thought to ourselves, what the heck? Anyway, we had a beer, but it was too civilized. So we had a beer or two and then we went back
Wow.
and
Uneventful
found the
journey.
truck.
Wow.
Yeah, it was fun. It was adventurous. It was exciting. There was no danger in our mind. And because we didn't have that focus on danger, we didn't create it.
So
That's
now
another lesson.
looking back at you going you know in the bushes of Africa with lions and wild animals around you, remember what we talked about earlier, that what you did at any given moment prepares you for the next moment. So you first living in South Africa with the constant danger and threat of danger and violence. How do you think that prepared you in a way, feeling almost like, oh, whatever, just lions, when you're actually in the bush?
Well, again, there's nothing you can do.
Yeah.
If you create the fear,
Mm.
they will latch onto it. So it was just the norm, if you like. And because we were young enough and foolish enough, maybe we didn't consider that there was a real danger. I mean, in the back of mind, this is a lion. If you ever see a lion take an animal down or a crocodile take something, there is an extreme speed, violence, and intent. But
Mm.
they're not like human beings.
Yeah.
They're purposeful. They do it opportunistic, yes, but they do it for food.
Yeah.
They don't do it out to
Survival.
survive like we.
For survival.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Would you?
And if you focus on the danger, that's what you're going to create. If you focus on, hey, it's fun, it's adventurous, that's what you create. It's your mind and the energy you send out. I mean, and that's the thing.
Yes.
We were sending out vibes to these animals that we weren't a threat.
Okay.
We weren't part of the thing.
We're not
And I
food.
had an experience
Yeah.
like that in Zimbabwe a few years later. we were staying in Vic Falls, around the Vic Falls area, a friend and I, and we'd rented a little brick chalet on the edge of the falls, or just close to the falls on the edge of the river, not actually the falls itself. But it was nighttime, and I said, okay, we're going to have a braai. I'm going to go and build the fire. A braai is a barbecue in Afrikaans. I'll go and build the fire. You get the meat ready. So Roy, my friend, said, okay, no problem. And I walked out about 30 foot, 40 foot away from the house. There's this little brick bright area next to some trees and thick bush and everything else. And I picked up some wood and I made a nice fire. And I'm just about to set it on fire so it can burn to coals. And I just looked up into this thick bush about 10 feet away. And there's an elephant casually stood there watching me.
Wow.
So my first thought was, if I light the fire, it's not going to be very polite because the smoke's going to go towards the elephant. It's going to upset it.
Ah.
So I didn't light the fire. I just stood there. And we stood there looking at each other and had this conversation, this beautiful conversation. And during that time, it went on for about 10 minutes or so, but during that time, I noticed that next to the elephant was a small deer-sized antelope called a bushbuck. And that
Wow.
was also casually watching me. And then a little bit later, a small family of warthogs came down to go to the river to get their sundowner. One of them brushed my leg as it walked past. I wasn't scared. I wasn't perceived as a threat. We were all part and parcel of that environment.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the energy I was sending out. And that's what they were picking up on. And they were, reflecting back to me that I'm not a threat to them, so they're not a threat to me. We had this beautiful interaction. It went on for about 10 minutes or so, and then the dusk got much darker, and the elephant just casually turned and disappeared like that in a split second.
Beautiful. Wow.
But again, it's that energy you send out.
Totally.
And
Yes.
I read a book a few years ago now, but it was called What Cops Know, and it was by a Chicago beat cop. In the 60s, I think he wrote the book, the late 60s, 69 or something. But he was saying that every single victim of violent crime knew they were going to get attacked.
Mm,
That was the energy they were putting out, and that's what attracted the attackers.
that makes sense. Yeah.
So if I'd have, become scared and everything else, the elephant would have possibly reacted in a totally different way. But because I respected him and I communicated with him energetically, everything was beautiful. And I'm sure that's what we were doing when we were just walking through the bush, towards
How do
the bar.
how did you realize not to lit that fire? Was it something that you knew or something you felt like
I just looked
communication in
up
your
as I
soul to
was.
tell you, hey, don't do that?
Yeah, I was just there and I just looked up like that for some reason. I don't know why. I just looked up and saw this elephant watching me.
No.
And that was it. There was some signal energetically or some understanding, intuition, if you like, or whatever. And that was it.
Wow, beautiful.
And, it doesn't have to be in the wilds of Africa. It can be anywhere in your life
Totally,
that
yeah.
you have these interactions. But again, children have it. If we go back to the beginning of the conversation, children have that ability, but it's conditioned out of us as we grow. Now, if we can keep that beauty and keep that inner child alive, as you say,
Hmm.
isn't life going to be so much better?
Absolutely. Wow. That's a powerful way to see things. And this is how we're gonna conclude part one because there's so much more that we need to cover. And there's so much more about
Mhm.
Africa. I really want to go deep into that, and then China, and then what you're doing. So I think this can be a multiple series type of podcast me and you will be
Well,
doing.
I've got a lot of stories just like you, so
Oh,
I'm
I
happy
can
to share.
imagine. I mean, and listen, Stuart, you need to write a book, even start a podcast about,
Mhm.
especially about your journey. We all have a
Well,
story, especially about Africa. That's fascinating.
mhm, yeah.
Not to
There's
mention,
so many things, and I've got a lot of stories I've started putting together, which will form part of the book, and I've got an
mhm,
idea about it. So I just need to make that happen so people can share. But the important thing is not the journey through Africa; it's the wisdom and the life lessons that we can pick up on
Absolutely.
from those things. That's what's important, because you never know what 2 words or 3 words are going to change someone's life.
Just like you in that bar, that gentleman that saw you. Wow, that was
Yeah,
powerful.
yeah, it was. And I didn't know how it was going to affect me 20, 30, 40, 50 years down the line.
Yeah,
But it stayed with me all that time in so many ways. And that's what we need. We need to meet somebody or hear a story from somebody sometimes to really change our life in the most profound way.
yes, absolutely.
And this is why it's so wonderful that you're doing this podcast, because you're finding these stories
Yes,
and you're sharing your stories, and you've got an audience who can hear them. And just one story it could save someone's life.
that's exactly the purpose of my podcast. Me and you sharing your incredibly inspiring, empowering, goosebump-inducing story. If we're going to inspire just one person to do good with their business, to get their life together, to whatever, to inspire them to believe back in themselves, then that would me for me that would be that's a definition of success. That's
Yeah.
what matters. This podcast is all about inspiring others through stories, because how since immemorial times is how we connected, it's how we as a human species we did things through stories. So
Yeah, that's all we are, isn't it?
listen, Stuart, absolute honor, pleasure, delight, blast to be talking with you. And I know for a fact we'll be doing quite a few episodes today. Let's wrap it up now. I have another call in 5 minutes. So
Okay.
we'll do part two either later this week or next week.
Mhm.
And I salute you. Have a fantabulous evening. For you, it's almost midnight in China. Oh, that's another story. 20 years in
Yeah.
China, that by itself can be an entire, not just podcast, but an entire season of podcast. So
Yeah, there's so much we can do when we just talk
absolutely.
and share stories. So, it's
Absolutely.
wonderful to talk to you. And it's been my honor to meet you first. And then, secondly, to be invited onto this podcast so we can share. And it's not me doing it, it's
Yes,
us
absolutely.
sharing.
Pleasure's all
That's
mine,
what's
brother.
important.
Have a wonderful evening. Can't wait to,
Yeah.
to, to talk to you again soon. Take care, brother.
Okay.
Cheers.
Take care then.
Ciao.
Ciao.